Welcome to The Next Stop Is with Jane August, my podcast where I get to chat with New York City's culture makers. And today I'm here with Barbara Sibley, who is a culinary and hospitality extraordinaire. I met Barbara through her work as creative director at Holiday Cocktail Lounge, where I've hosted FranCon the past 2 years. She has an incredible career. She's the owner of La Palapa Cocina Mexicana in the East Village. She's written cookbooks. She's the current president of Les Dames Escoffier New York. She's a member of the James Beard Foundation Women Entrepreneurial Leadership Program, and probably so many other things we have yet to mention, but we'll have her tell us that. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi, Jade. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here because I think you're so cool. So I guess we can start from the beginning. You were born and raised in Mexico City. How did food play a role in your upbringing?
Well, first of all, I was born there. My parents moved from the States and moved there. In those days, it was really pre-NAFTA. So even though my parents made sure we had English, they ended up staying in Mexico. They never came back. It was a very Mexican upbringing. So that, and paired with the fact that I was an extremely shy child, I was always much happier in the kitchen at a party than in the party.
And so at what point did you realize that culinary arts were going to play such a large role in your life and career?
You know, it really was happenstance. I studied anthropology. I came to New York, first of all, because my sister was here. And when I got here and everything was in English and in Spanish in the subway, I was like, okay, this is a city I can live in. Because I had spent a bit of time in Michigan and felt completely at a loss. Like the culture shock was huge. So I was really happy to be in New York. And I ended up working, always been very interested in food, love food, and really can remember food. But I ended up, as many of us, like working in the restaurant business. I worked at a 3-star French restaurant with a woman chef, when I first got here, and ended up then working at other restaurants. And I really, really realized that what I was doing as a means to an end was actually something that I really enjoyed day to day.
Neat. So was English or Spanish your first language?
Both.
Both, okay.
Really. So really my most comfortable language is being able to switch back and forth.
Oh,
it was
that's
kind
neat.
of like, it was sort of like mommy's shoes, daddy's shoes, mis zapatos, so growing up. So really, like, it's a big mix for me.
And where did you learn to cook?
Really, I'm more of a self-taught chef. I've worked in so many restaurants, and I also worked at a restaurant with, this, like I said, with Sally Dar, who was a 3-star French restaurant. And so I had a lot of influence there, as well as a lot of influence in Mexico, because in Mexico the tradition is to have the mayoras, is that the women are the heads of the large kitchens, especially in the days of like haciendas and things like that. It was the mayora. And even to this day in Mexican, cuisine and traditional Mexican cuisine in Mexico City, you'll have a mayora. So rather than a head chef. So I had that example in my life. And really became a chef really just working. I never went to culinary school.
Was it a big culture shock when you came to the U.S. and realized that most restaurants are ran by men?
It definitely was. I mean, it really, when I opened, so La Palapa, I opened La Palapa. We're going into our 25th year. So when I opened La Palapa, it's really a pioneer. There are very few really authentic Mexican restaurants. I'm extremely selfish. I just have to say that right off the bat. So the food that I do is really what I'm homesick for. So It's kind of like putting my two halves back together. In those days, we were a lot of women in it. And I said it back then, and I'll say it now. It was in an interview with Andrea Strong, who's still writing about food today. And I said, well, as soon as there's a lot of money to be made in Mexican cuisine, there'll be a lot of men. So in Spanish we say dicho y hecho, said and done, right? So it's definitely the case now. And it was definitely a culture shock just in general, because in Mexico, the other thing that's very different, especially you as a person who does so many different things in your life. In Mexico, if you're an artist and an engineer, or if you're a painter and an architect, or if you're a poet and a dentist, there's no conflict. In the United States, there's so much. So I sort of grew up with this culture where people's multiplicity of identities and career choices weren't in conflict. Whereas in the United States, it's like if you're not a chef and you haven't only done chefing, then you're not a real chef. Or if you're not a writer and you've only done writing and you're only earning your living writing, or a different kind of creator, there's really such a sort of lack of understanding of the sort of the whole person and what it takes, first of all, also to live and survive, but that there's in the United States there's such a conflict in that, and whereas in Mexico there's not.
That's so interesting. Because I know for me, it's like I do a ton of different things.
Tons of things.
It depends on
Tons of
who I
things.
meet, how I introduce myself as.
Exactly.
That's so
Whereas like
fascinating.
in Mexico, you'd just be like, yeah, I do this and I do this and I do this, and it would be very accepted.
Did you have a favorite food growing up?
Avocados, probably.
Okay.
You know, I can remember saying, like, you know, asking as a baby, like, what do you call this? You know? Like the first recipe I ever invented, I was like 6. So I have a very vivid taste memory. I can recreate a taste. I've done jobs where I've recreated tastes based on someone's description of their experience.
Whoa.
Which is kind of crazy fun.
That's like a superpower.
So I was kind of surprising. I was like, can I do this? And then they're like, oh my gosh, you nailed it. I was like, oh my God. It's sort of like poetry or something. I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
So you were always making recipes, I guess.
Always. Yeah, I was always cooking. I was always in the back with the cooks. I was always curious. I, can remember different, having certain dishes and where I had them and what they tasted like, and I love it. I love to eat. What can I say? And then I love to share Mexico. I mean, it's been such a joy when I think about how I had to explain everything when I opened La Palapa. Like, I couldn't even have anything. I couldn't even have a burrito on the menu, or nobody would order a mole. Like I had to have a very specific menu. Everything was fully bilingual, like long, involved, descriptions in English and in Spanish.
It's truly authentic. What makes something like truly authentic Mexican food?
Now you're going to get me down the rabbit hole. No, the thing is, it's very strange and ephemeral because, for instance, there was another pioneering Mexican chef, and over the course of her restaurant, she ended up hiring a lot of people from South Asia. And the thing that was so interesting to me as an anthropologist is that at the end of her restaurant, when she was closing her restaurant, and I went to celebrate and support, have a meal there, her recipes had slowly morphed to South Asian palate, to the South Asian palate. It's also caused like trying to understand this has caused a lot of research on my part in terms of modern Mexican. Like there have been modern Mexican restaurants in New York that I've gone to, and I've thought, is it that I'm too much of a traditionalist, that this doesn't feel right to me, or is it something else? So I actually went to Mexico and did a deep dive into all the super modern Mexican restaurants like Puyol and Quintonil and all these restaurants in Mexico City that are at the cutting edge of sort of like what Wiley Dufresne was doing here, like very, very molecular, very modern, and yet they tasted so Mexican. So it's just something that's so ephemeral. I don't know that it can be taught. It has to do with like the sense memory. You can have a recipe and approximate it, but if you're like, we're riffing, you wouldn't be able to get there, And so, so it's really something that I've tried to define, and yet I can't tell you what the key is, except that it happens. It's like it's something that's like, I mean, when you think like, to me, the whole with South Asia, I mean, so often South Asians love Mexican cuisine. It's a lot of the same flavor notes, but the proportions are a little different. The nuance is a little different, So.
What are your thoughts on all like the fusion restaurants and like the Americanized Mexican restaurants?
Well, once again, I mean, I grew up in Mexico, which has so many cultures. And I grew up going to a school where there are people from 30 different countries in my school. So, I sort of understand it. There is sort of interplay that is practical, which is interesting to me. I'm always interested in how culture is transmitted and adopted. There's one thing that I can say for sure. The one thing is that delicious is universal. So you're going to find people, and Mexican cuisine is incredibly adaptable. So you have the French arrive with a crepe. There's tons of crepes now, but they came with the French because what was it except another tortilla? And you think about when the Spaniards came, there was no dairy, there were no goats, no sheep, no cows on the continent. Chickens come from Asia. Rice comes from Asia. You have just in what we sort of think about as authentic Mexican cuisine. You have so many influences. You have the whole now de China, which is the whole trade route of the Pacific. You have chilies going from the Americas all the way around the world and then back again. So like the habanero, they say actually it's probably from Java, probably went to South Asia, then through the Caribbean it came back to the Americas and sort of did the whole global thing. Now, that's not to say that there isn't like a lot of like stuff out there that's just, shortcuts, bastardization. You have a taco at every pizza place practically, right? You have a taco like on every corner.
My bagel place sells tacos now.
Yeah, yeah. I can totally see that. And, it's a little bit frustrating. It means that now what I'm doing is that I'm starting to make tamales because I like to be sharing something that people haven't had. So I'm like, okay, you think you've got tacos down. Let's have some tamales. So I'm doing tamales. But the thing is that what's also interesting is that there's such an interplay. The one thing I guess that I would say, I like backtrack a little bit. I do get frustrated when folks here in New York think, I know what a taco is. Like, I know what a taco is. The real taco is this taco with like 3 little microgreens of cilantro that are put on with like a tweezer and 3 drops of salsa. Right?
Like, I've been to Los Angeles.
And it's curated, right? This like the curated taco experience. And it's like this. What people don't realize is that those curated taco experiences are all practical. It's food cost. In Mexico, you have salsas on the table. You know not to double dip. You wouldn't double dip the ketchup. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't like suck on the ketchup bottle. But in the United States, you have to throw those salsas away. You can't leave them on the table. So it gets very expensive. So all of a sudden you have like chefs thinking like, oh, I'll make this curated taco. But what it really means is that you're not wasting food and you have a better profit. So all of a sudden you see those tacos going back to Mexico. And so now you get like a cross-pollinization, which is really interesting. And not that it isn't delicious to have a curated taco, but it comes from a practical point of view. Sometimes we think that so many things in food are completely driven by aesthetics, but you'd be surprised about like so many, like you've been to holidays, the whole speakeasy, modern speakeasy movement didn't come out of someone's creativity, like let me start a speakeasy. Now people are doing that. Mm-hmm. But originally it was milk and honey, and the landlord said, if your customers bother my tenants, you're out of here. I'm not going to rent this bar to you. So they started a whole thing where nobody could wait outside and they had to be quiet and they had to phone in. And then you have a speakeasy. But it was completely a practical, or you have someplace like PDT is across the street from a school that's owned by the Catholic diocese. So you have you have a rule which door is far enough away to get a liquor license across the street from something that's like basically a church. So you have all of these really practical things that come about that you think are purely aesthetic. I find it fascinating. To me, if it's delicious, it's delicious.
The speakeasy thing, I'm like, once I seen it on TikTok, it's like, new speakeasy. I'm like, nope, that's not what it is. I'm like, wrong use of the word. We all know about it. It's not a secret.
It's on TikTok. Yeah. I don't think it worked that way back in the day.
So how long were you working in restaurants before you decided to open La Palapa?
A long time. So I started when I was 17. So, it's like 40. I've been working in restaurants like 40 years.
What made you decide to open a restaurant? Because that's a pretty big feat to take on.
I had worked for a lot of people. And I mean, actually not worked for a lot of people, but I'd done projects for one person, a lot of different projects. And in fact, they went back to Europe and left me running this giant gastropub for them. And so it was always really interesting to me. And it was also the community. It was my New York community. And at that point, they said, like, if you don't stay and run it, I'm going to close it. And that was like really like my New York family. So I was like, okay, I'll stay and run it. And so I had this opportunity which was amazing to sort of have a full restaurant handed to me and have that experience. And I think I realized, really how interesting it was and how gratifying it was to all the moving parts and the people and the creativity and the food and the fun. And then I had a business partner. We had a few different projects that we were thinking about. We finally took like restaurant finance class, and we're like, we could teach this. Like, why aren't we doing our own thing? And so we had a few different concepts. But then the location that we found had been her ideas were like Italian, and the location that we found had been like a Mediterranean and Italian, and they'd both gone out of business. So I was like, okay, it's going to be the Mexican. So we went with my childhood, with my cuisine and my concept. So it was a few different things. It was sort of just time. It was time to do my own thing. I really, at that point in New York, I felt like if I wanted a good guacamole, I had to have it one place. If I wanted beans, I could have them this place. If I wanted enchiladas, like maybe I could get them here. But really, I couldn't get the food that I really, really was homesick for. The first few years, I brought a lot of stuff up in my suitcase. It would be just like chiles and raw sugar and achiote paste, like, over and over. It would just be like a lot of ingredients. I would bring them up from Mexico. And then because of NAFTA, strangely, I also could get suddenly some vegetables that I couldn't get when I first moved to New York. Like I used to go to Chinatown and sort of get a lot of things there, Thai restaurants that were Thai. But it was a struggle. And I would say even a couple of years ago, people would be like, but at Chili's, I have my salsa made with tomato juice and it's for free on the table. And it's sort of as opposed to you still have people that don't really understand the authentic cuisine. But it's very liberating in New York now that so many people are more in tune, and it gives me more freedom to be even more creative.
Well, and you've been around for now 25 years, which is incredible. Because what's the stat? It's like 60% of restaurants close in their first year or something.
It's insane. It's hard to. It doesn't feel that long because it's still fun.
Yeah. So what did you do at the beginning to be able to hold on to longevity for this long?
Well, I did have a lot of experience. Like I said, I'd had that opportunity of working with someone who gave me responsibility and authority. I had to ask for it. At a certain point, I was like, I want the title, and if you're going to make me responsible, then you have to give me the authority. So I had that experience. So I was very lucky in that I had that. And then my team, I've had an incredible, wonderful relationship with my team. My head chef, Domingo, who's my right hand, I was in my early 20s. He was 14 when we met. I had worked with his older brother. And, he's been my right hand all this time. Most of the recipes are mine, but there are certain key recipes that were his mom's. Any recipes in La Palapa that are not from Morelos are mine because I traveled and I had recipes from all over the country and research that I had done. But there's a couple of things, like the chorizo is his mom's chorizo. But more than anything, we've just had this amazing relationship to be able to work together all these years. And so I have folks that have returned to work with me now that used to work with me before I opened La Palapa. It's partly that. I mean, it's the longevity is really the people.
For people who don't work in service, likely have no idea how a restaurant runs, loaded question, but can you kind of explain like what goes into running and operating a restaurant?
Okay. So my joke is that the bear is like an advertisement for like restaurants, the way like The Shining is an advertisement for like a career in writing. I mean, restaurants are pretty crazy. It is crazy. The thing with the bear is like there are no customers in the bear. Do you notice? There are no customers. Like no Yelp reviews. No, and you learn people are so emotional about their meals and how they eat and how they come in and how they, people are so connected to eating together that I always am kind of like, gosh, they're just missing this entire aspect of it. It's one of the things is it's like running a factory and everything is perishable and your feedback loop, your customer service feedback loop is instant, right? So if you do something right or you do something wrong, it's instant, right away. It can be incredibly rewarding to share something that you've made and have someone appreciate it right away. I'm a painter as well, and like you don't have it that much with something if you're doing the visual arts, right? You don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're performing, you get that. So there's a lot of performance to it. There's a lot of thinking and troubleshooting and constantly solving puzzles. but the day-to-day is like basically you have a huge factory, right? So you have all the mechanical stuff. You have to be able to have that has to be working. But what really has first, like I always say, if I do my to-do grid, like the most important part of that is always the people first. Like you've got to make sure you have your people. Got to make sure that people have what they need to do it to create and make the art, right? So you need the onions and the tortillas and the masa and the chiles and the right chiles, and the quality of the ingredients. Like you have to give, and then you have a chance to like have people make this art, and then you have a chance to serve it which can be incredibly frustrating and incredibly rewarding. Mostly, rewarding, and every now and then, as humans are, they will be human and be a little crazy. There's a lot of adrenaline, and so that can be a little addicting. I would say that anyone who's in service like has that. It's like a slight addiction. It's a rush.
Yeah, you like the thrill by the chaos.
It's a yeah. It's like I don't know, like riding a bronco in the rodeo or something. It's kind of like that. Like you're like, okay, I'm going to make this. This is going to like happen, and it's going to work, and it's all going to come together, and it's going to be great, and people are going to have a wonderful time, and make memories, and be part of your community. And then at the other side of that, you have a chance to then also mentor and have that happen with the people that you're working with, which is also a big part of what is satisfying to me.
It's so exciting, just like, especially the whole idea of going out to a restaurant. I feel like growing up, it's always like, oh, you get to go out for dinner and not eat at home. And then now it's like I'm an adult. I'm like, all I do is go to restaurants. And
well,
like,
you're in New York. We're in New York, right? That's what we do. So
we're in the place to do it.
Well, in New York, they're like our living rooms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's where you get together. I mean, people entertain at home, but really, mostly we go out together.
Yeah, because everyone's apartment's too small to
pretty
host.
much.
And then next door to La Palapa is Holiday Cocktail Lounge. How did you get involved there?
Well, it's interesting. So I was living at the building above Holiday for a really long time, and actually years and years ago. So since about 1965, it was owned by Stefan Lutak and his wife, and they're the two sons. And I was living in the building. Neither one of the sons really wanted to be there, but the mom had passed away, and the dad was very old. And so at one point, I almost helped them run it, and then that didn't work out because the brothers fought. And then so about 10 years later, Stefan, who was a character and a half, passed away. He worked in the bar until 3 weeks before he passed, and at almost 90, he passed. He'd been a Ukrainian soccer star and was known for not serving you. Like if people came in and asked for a cocktail, he would just give you like, a Jack and soda, and that'd be that. You would have and in those little short glasses, which you've seen, had cocktails in. So that's what he would serve it in. That's why we have those little shorties, because that was what the glass that Stefan liked to use. And he would do like, if he didn't like you, he'd say, he would sing like, what am I going to give you? Nothing. And he would like sing operatically and kick people out. So, and all kinds of people came to this bar. I mean, it was an incredible, incredible place. But he passed, and the brothers figured out, and then they sold the building. And the person who was buying the building, and I was like, hello, my New York life. I said, well, the community board is pretty tough. I've been in this community a long time. If you need help, let me know. And basically the owner of the bar and the building is Robert Ehrlich, who invented Pirate Booty. He's the founder of Pirate Booty. He's this amazing, inventor, innovator, creative person, guy. And so I said, sure, I'll help you. And he said, I'm going to own a building in a bar in 3 days. I was like, okay. And then it turns out that the building needed significant renovations, like and no beams, all kinds of things. So it was like that was a whole renovation was sort of like Zen and archaeology, because it was such a classic location. It was such a classic bar. And also, really in a time where gentrification was really eliminating so many East Village landmarks, cool, historical, artsy landmarks. So, there really was like a mission to save the bar. It took a few years to renovate because we kept coming up against the realities of this 150-year-old building that had really been neglected. like, some stuff that really needed some very serious work. So it was a huge project, and it was very exciting to do it with him. It was kind of, if it hadn't been for him, I'm not sure that very many people would have had the patience and the drive and the ability to renovate this space. So in the process of that, we found out that it's the 50th liquor license after Prohibition. Something like they didn't even have blue laws until like 950, whatever. Like all of those first, like 1,000 liquor licenses after Prohibition were 100% corruption. So there was a tunnel in that from the bar that went under the ground. I mean, you can't find it anymore because like now all of the utilities are underground. But there used to be a tunnel from Holiday to the bar at Theater 80, and then another tunnel from there to First Avenue. And they say like 50,000 barrels of rum came through the East River. Anyway, it was totally a real speakeasy. So it was really like Zen and archaeology, because it was like everything that we touched, we were like, we had to change it. Mm-hmm. And yet we're trying to preserve it at the same time. And I did have help. I had some amazing designer help with that because they had filmed a film called Still Your Darling. And so the art direction team had measured the entire bar, documented the entire bar. So when it came time to renovate it, they helped.
Oh, cool.
They helped with the design because they'd done all this. But all the colors, for instance, like, and the thing with Holiday is like it gets copied all the time. But like the green banquettes at Holiday, that was the color that we found behind the paneling. There's like everything that is there is actually in reference to the sort of the archaeological dig of things that we found.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. So after it's been renovated, you're creative director. What does the creative director of a bar do? I feel like that's a rare title to really hear.
Well, it was like, first of all, it was like putting on a show, right? Like it was like being a creative director. I mean, you had to like envision how it was going to still be like, and move the bar and change huge amounts of things. That it would still feel like Holiday. It would still be Holiday. Still have the original phone booth, but have actually like working air and it was lit by the thing. I don't know if you know, but it was lit by Christmas lights, which is why there are always Christmas lights at Holiday. The reason we found out why it was because all of the wiring was so old. It was cloth.
Whoa!
It was cloth wiring, and in doing the research, it just is so interesting, I mean, it was so creative that in the end, that's really what it is and what I continue to do. It's like we produce a menu every year. We do a zine because that's the East Village thing. It's a zine. We shop local because as much as we we source everything we have and make locally because we're so tired of people saying like, oh, I love that store. And then it went out of business. And I'm like, did you ever spend any money there? Like, when was the last time you were there? Really? They're gone. Yeah.
Did you go?
Did you go? So I sort of feel like part of our mission is to support, places like Flower Power or the, Dual, like the, Indian Spice Shop. Like if we need to, look for flavors or Dinosaur Hill, which was a toy store that used to be on 9th Street. We got a lot of our garnishes. So we like garnish our drinks with toys, but that comes from the local thing. So all of those things are like being a creative director. They're not really like bar. I mean, yes, I manage the bar and the beverage and, and I do I do a lot of the practical stuff, but really a lot of it has been this creative direction. And so that's really what I see my role, because it's sort of like either that or you could be like caretaker of the spirit,
yeah.
or some bizarre thing. But I think it's really the best description.
Well, and I think it's so rare to have like a curated cocktail menu at a bar that's kind of feels like a dive. And that cocktail bars, I think just like cocktail bars in general have like a kind of like stuffiness. It feels like cocktails are still like such a high class vibe to them. Like, is that a thing that you still notice in the industry?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Bars? But and honestly, that's where also like I'm a firm believer in like the serendipity of destiny, right? Like the fact that we had to do that massive renovation means that we could pause and watch. So if we had opened exactly, if it had been the turnkey that Rob had liked, they only took cash with all that implies, right? Everything was super cheap, rot gut, dive. But our sort of idea was like that, why can't you have like the most amazing cocktail in a comfortable dive bar, like an elegant dive? Like, why does it have to take you 20 minutes to get a drink from some dude with, you know, a sparse beard, a leather apron, and 20 minutes of stirring, and they're not even saying hello or giving you eye contact. Why do you have to, you know? But doing the renovation like gave us that breathing space to really nail what holiday is, which is like, you know, an elegant dive or a dive where you're having the most incredible craft cocktails.
Why do you think that people are kind of intimidated by cocktails? How do you think we can break that stigma behind like cocktails?
Well, what we do is we just do it really fun, right? Our current menu is all based on pulp novels. You know, our food menu is the easy bake menu. You know, I mean, we kind of get very cheeky and very, you know, a little bit irreverent. We have the Bouncing Soul song in the menu. We always have some reference to the history of the East Village. But, you know, so we just like have a lot of fun with it and the toys. And so, you know, even though it's like the most very rarefied pandan milk punch, so it's a very specific, you know, flavor profile, and you know, we'll stick like a toy dinosaur in it. We kind of try to break it down, like make it more accessible and make it just more fun.
When you're making the new menus each year, like where do you start? How do you conceive what the theme is? And
you know, right now I'm in that moment where it's a bit panicky because I always feel like there's no way, I don't have another one in me. But usually I do. So the beverage director is Alex Strange, and so he and I will start to riff, and we it starts to bubble up, and we start like we've done. I mean, I've done menus with several beverage directors now, so that's always really interesting to me too. Just like, you know, you sort of develop a relationship with the person that's the cocktail creator, because I make great drinks, but they're specialists, right? So and then you start the dialogue, and so you know, I worked with Michael Neff, I worked with Eric Trickett, I worked with, you know, Alex Strange, Danny Neff. So we all these things. So where you sort of start with sort of recipes, and then we start to think about, and usually it comes up from a joke. Like, you know, I did all of a sudden I was like the previous one, which you know, I'd like all of a sudden I was remembering like the movie The Time Machine, and I was like, oh my God, Time Machine. And so we did a whole menu based on The Time Machine, and then we did a whole menu based on bars we loved that are gone. Like love letters to the bars that are no longer around, you know. And this one is really like sort of goes back to when the bar was a burlesque house before it was holiday. So we sort of had this like, you know, if Shelley Winters, because she used to hang out there, imagining Shelley Winters and her, you know, fabulous buxomness at the bar, like if she was reading a book, what she would be reading. And so it was also the ninth menu. It's Love Potion number 9, and Alex is a real heavy metal at heart dude. He's an old CBGB, you know, not old, but he's like CBGB's, like some really real good headbanging music. And it turns out that there's a heavy metal version of Love Potion number 9. And so this is where you just start a dialogue and you start to riff, and it just gets better and better and better. And then, you know, Holly Zindisi, who's our graphic designer, she actually came, you know, reached out looking for a job, and I looked her up, and, you know, the classic way, like, hey, what do you do? She's like, and all this graphic design. I was like, well, do you want to start designing menus? And so we start to have this like dialogue that goes back and forth. By March, we have a new magazine and a new menu.
So do the old ones get retired, basically? Does anything come back from
old
ones? Or?
Well, we do. We always have a section of the menu that is like things you loved before and we're doing again. And we usually call it some, you know, cheeky thing. So we have a structure that we follow for the new menu. So that helps us too.
And you mentioned that holiday is now expanded to daytime service.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, we had stopped doing draft beer during the pandemic because I'll be very honest. If I couldn't carry it, I wasn't going to have it because I was by myself at the bar a lot. So I can't really carry a bunch of kegs of beer up and down stairs, precarious stairs in the basement. And so we had sort of discontinued it, and we didn't know what to do with it. And we had space. And then Rob started to really develop this passion for coffee. So we have this coffee machine that was designed in 1971 in the middle of the bar now. And it's so much fun because, first of all, we have amazing coffee. We're using Super Lost coffee, which is roasted in Brooklyn. And it's really delicious coffee. And it's also, the thing that is also about Rob is that Rob is like incredibly innovative. and really exciting to work for because he'll have this incredible idea. And then, like, when we're talking like creative director, like, oh, how am I going to make this happen? How is it going to work in the bar and be true to holiday at the same time as really open to change and open to innovation, right? So you have to for me, it's fun. It's a great challenge. So we have this great coffee, we have this amazing machine, and holiday, we realized too that, we love to be in holiday during the day. It's such a great space. Plus there's a great backyard, which once the weather is warm will be amazing. Just realized that this was something that we were kind of being selfish about. It's sort of like a really, like going into somebody's living room where you can do your work, where you can hang out. And then what's also interesting is like the amount of people that we have coming in for day drinking. But also like people will come in and like some people will be having coffee at a table and some people will be drinking.
So what time are you opening now?
8 a.m.
Whoa.
I'm a little bit out of my mind right now.
Yeah, how does that happen? You're basically like doubling your hours.
It's crazy.
Like how big of a task was
well,
that?
it's interesting because for a long time we thought about like, well, maybe we should open at 11. But the thing about opening at 11 is that it wouldn't be the same as just being there. Like once you're there, and another thing about opening businesses, and particularly in New York, because they're so neighborhood and people, and New Yorkers are such creatures of habit, that you have to introduce yourself into people's habits. It's going to take a little bit of time. And when are there people walking on St. Mark's at 8 and 9 in the morning? By 11, there's nobody there. By 11, everybody's where they're going to be, even if they're working from home. And we realize there's a lot of people in the East Village that are working from home. So we have regulars already that come in for their like croissant, which we have delicious. Also, it's also an opportunity to fool around in the kitchen and we do like this incredible like chocolate focaccia, like I just start to go like a little crazy. It's hard for me to hold back, as you can tell. I go like, ooh, what else can we make? And then, but we have folks that come in and then they're done with their workday. They come back for a cocktail. It's like the definition of a local. And we have like some parents that like drop their kids off there's like a little nursery school half a block away, and then they come if they have and hang out there before they have to go back and pick them up. So that thing that I said before, how it's so fascinating how you create something and you think you created it and it's this, right? And then people start to come in and interact with your art and they change it. So we may have thought, oh, we're only doing coffee and then we'll switch to the main menu and that's it. But no, because we're having like a hybrid situation all day long and not just on the weekends.
That's so interesting. So this daytime service is like ongoing now.
It's ongoing. And then even this afternoon I left, like all of a sudden everyone was coming in and they're like, well, do you have lunch? And we're like, well, we were just kind of sort of switching into like dinner and we hadn't really thought about lunch. But what's determining that is the interplay of our creation and what people are looking for, the community, right? And it smells so good in the bar. Can I tell you, like starting the morning there with like baking croissants and bacon. And and we do have a lot of vegan stuff too. So we have like we have really good vegan croissants.
Yeah, because in a way, like a coffee shop and a bar, I think serve the same function. Like I bartend, but I had friends who are baristas. I'm like, you're just a morning bartender, and I'm just an evening barista.
Exactly. Yeah. And the chef is just the food tender.
Yeah, you're like making little drinks for people.
Yeah, exactly.
At any time of the day.
Yeah.
With running a business and pretty much everything, like costs have been going up in restaurants and bars. I see so many videos and posts and people are like, oh, why is every cocktail in New York City $20? Like, can you break down how we get there to cocktails costing $20?
It's so $20 would be not covering all your costs. Mm-hmm. We did it really exact for this new menu because for one thing, so there's a lot of things that have changed where you used to be able to buy like, oh, I'm going to buy 10 cases of this. But like since in the pandemic between supply chain and everything, it was just, you just don't have like the bandwidth to just say, okay, I'm going to put this one brand on and I'm going to buy so much of it. It's going to make it less expensive, right? You obviously have rents, you have all of those fixed costs have gone up so much. We're a place that is always, we believe in paying a fair wage. It's because we really demand a lot from the folks that work for us, as opposed to like the tipped wage. So we really did like a ingredient without the discount, sort of ingredient, what it really cost, what the time cost, what if you put all of those hours to clarify that milk punch, like what would it be in actual real cost? What really has happened in the past is one of the things that happens in New York is that, and it's all caught up now, is that for a while there you would have a place that was paying $20,000 next to a place that was paying $3,000 in rent, right? Because of leases and gentrification. Now you have every place is expensive. Brooklyn's expensive. Brooklyn's just as expensive as Manhattan. So so opening a business like in Bushwick, you're not going to be like, wow, my drinks can be so much cheaper in Bushwick.
Yeah, there's
anymore.
So many
you can't
costs
do that.
Behind everything.
There's so many costs behind it. There's like tons of regulation. There's tons of of insecurity with all this stuff. It's very it's kind of nerve wracking. So it is really what it costs. It's kind of shocking. Now the other thing that used to happen in New York, that's sort of like maybe like a very economic kind of thing. But in New York, you used to be able to people would stay out really late, which people are starting to stay out later, but people the last few years have not been staying out late. So like you might say like, well, let's stay open till 4, all kinds of things that you don't want to have happen between 2 and 4. But let's say in the theory, right, you want to stay open till 4. But now really not too many people are out at 4. You don't have a lot of customers. It's not, people don't feel as comfortable walking around. You don't have like a whole lot of people walking around at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, when you're thinking about how to make the fixed costs, that's what happens. So you have all these things that have made the business model in some strange ways more like it is in the rest of the country, more like it is in suburbia, right, where you're not having people walking, people taking the subway as much. You have more people everything is more spread out, or people are working from home, or people's habits are different, so you have fewer people. So when you have fewer people, you have fewer turns. So it just means that like everything, you're not, that's sort of like the nitty gritty of sort of how you, like if you were to come to me and say like, Barb, I want to open a restaurant, I would say, how many seats you have, how many times are you going to get butts in those seats? I mean, that's sort of that's the bottom that's your base. And I mean, pricing, if we priced it to 22 at Holiday, that didn't even take into account how many people are going to drink that drink. But I think traditionally in New York, you've had a lot of that mobility and that has sort of artificially lowered the prices here. Like you'll notice like you could eat here a lot cheaper than in, say, Detroit or Philadelphia or, the suburbs. Like, if you went to Long Island to some like fancy restaurant, it was going to be much more expensive.
What's the value that you see in people choosing to spend their money on food and beverage as opposed to like whatever else is in the world?
There's all kinds of things. Because so for example, so this for over a decade, I've had a $5 frozen margaritas all day, all night at La Palapa on Tuesdays. It's humongous. It's phenomenal. It's crazy. I've thought about changing it, but I'm just like, you know what? The $5 thing, it's also marketing. You're just like, people love it. We don't change anything. We don't change our portion size. We don't change our recipe. We don't, it's just what it is. And it's an incredible party. And it's like a party that like goes all day, all night. And it's a blast. So you can do sort of limited things like that, or happy hours. But a lot of people don't really want to go to happy hour necessarily, So you're sort of trying to balance the experience then with what people expect and balance your menu, and it's tricky. It's hard to do.
Do you think the recent like sober curious movement is having negative effects on bars because people aren't drinking as much?
Well, it's in development. It's interesting. So when I talk about Rob being such a visionary, so Rob saw this coming 10 years ago. Yeah, he and honestly, the bar team that was in place then were like super not into it. They were like, "What? Non-alcoholic drinks? Are you kidding?" And then like the next year, Seedlip started, and they basically used like all of his ideas. I mean, it was like, directly. I mean, Rob tends to really understand what's going on. So I think that he's seeing like coffee, so it's always interesting for me to get that feedback. So because I can sometimes be like in the day to day so busy that it's when he comes in with like something from the outside, it can be very creative. So I think that using that, those are all different ways of making the bar, vibrant, is to do all these other things. The sober curious thing, I think what's affecting more than the sober curious is just the how much weed everyone is consuming. So I would say that will probably even out. I think right now we have like everyone whoever wanted to do weed all day in, day out their entire lives was waiting for this moment, and that'll plateau, and people will be like, you know what, it's not so fun to just be home, eating munchies out of a bag of Doritos. Like, I want to actually have go out and do some things, and you're starting to see that more. But I think that really, like, people talk about the sober curious a lot, and yeah, it affects. But we have a lot of. I mean, I have so many sober friends, and they love to go out. And can you offer the question really is, what are the alternatives? Like now in beer, it's very exciting. Like I just switched the not the zero ABV section of Holiday. Like we just did a reprint, and it's mostly beers because that's really what is excellent are these zero ABV beers. I mean, zero ABV Guinness is delicious. Zero ABV Corona, delicious. We have an IPA. We have it just seems like it's hit it. In terms of like the booze substitutes, first of all, they're super expensive. Like when people complain about the price of like non-alcoholic, like Seedlip is like you might as well have Johnny Walker Black. I mean, the price of the Almave is like as expensive or more expensive. I'm not arguing what their production costs and what the value that area of value, but I am just saying like when you give that to the guest. They're like, but this has no alcohol. Why is it so expensive? But actually, if you're using some of those booze substitutes, they're more expensive. I mean, Phony Negroni is crazy expensive. The beers are pretty much priced as beers, but they're obviously a corporate, and they're making that decision. Like, I don't know what their actual costs situation is, but they have decided that they're going to make, price it the same. So it is affecting it definitely. The value proposition is different. People don't feel like it's that special. We had a huge selection of like curated zero ABV cocktails, hardly sold. We'll see what happens now with the beer. I'm curious. I just switched it up just to see what happens.
Are there any other interesting trends you're seeing right now in like bar, restaurant world?
I'm just seeing a trend to people going out more, which is interesting because there are times in the city where people have felt not happy to go out. People are out more than ever right now. People are out in larger groups, 6, 8, 10. Like people are out and partying. And also right now downtown, we feel the fact that everyone who's at NYU or in college is older, a little bit older, because a lot of people took time off or like got off the main track. So we're still seeing the pandemic. You're still seeing stuff that it's hard to eke out.
Like us in the music venue world, it's people, they're realizing, oh, why don't people know how to act? Why don't people know how to like tip or do stuff? I was like, because they didn't have anyone to bully them in college of how to follow those social norms.
No, they all learned to drink doing White Claws in their parents' basement. And do you know what I call them?
What do you call them?
Bar toddlers. They don't know how to act.
Yeah.
They don't know how to modulate their voice. They don't know how to order. They move all the furniture around all the time. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, stop moving the furniture.
Do you have a favorite cocktail to make and a favorite cocktail to order?
I'm really a tequila girl,
okay.
I have to say. I mean, I love cocktails. I love a Knob Creek sour, but on my own, normally I'm just like a tequila neat. Is really what I like to drink.
Besides your own, are there any bars or restaurants that you're really loving right now?
Well, I would say that like in my sort of like afternoons, I do like to go to Atla down, if I'm wanting Mexican and I want to, I don't want to be sort of having my work radar on. I like to go there. I really for bars, it's really hard when you live next to Holiday, to be honest. But there's going to back to Temple Bar for martinis has been fun. I love Casamono, for dinner. We tend to go to Hearth because it's like a lot of things. I tend to do a lot of things in the neighborhood, more likely.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap it up?
Well, I want to switch. All I want to say is I want to switch and ask you all the questions next time.
Okay.
Because I know you have so much to say and so, do so many interesting things. To me, it's just doing, being in the restaurant business where I am now. It just gives you such an opportunity to meet people like you, to be part of the whole game and play that FranCon is, and to just enjoy the sheer cheekiness. I mean, that's why I love to do what I love. I love it because you get to meet people.
And so my final question I've been asking people is, what's been bringing you joy lately?
Oh, joy! All of once again, the new stuff. Working on the tamales and working on the coffee, and sort of thinking about opening another place, like looking at spaces. Just thinking about what else can I do? Looking at the menu, I have to celebrate the 25th anniversary, so I have to really think about that. And I don't like to celebrate it the way people usually do. Like, to me, I want to think about well, what would I do, or what would I eat, and what would I, So I'm sort of working on some food festival type things, and some, working on that. I would love to celebrate by having all of the talented people that have worked for me over the years, and doing a theater showcase fundraiser. To me, that would be a blast, because I've had folks work for me and who still work for me who are incredible musicians and actors, and so I mean, so that's sort of where I'm at. I'm sort of just thinking about how to celebrate and how to mark.
This has been The Next Stop Is with Jane August. You can follow me, Jane, at Jane August on Instagram and TikTok. The Next Stop Is recorded at Brick House in downtown Brooklyn. It premieres on Brooklyn Free Speech Radio. You can listen to other episodes in the same place you're listening to this one.